Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started now. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. It's AOPEN. We're featuring Chrome, Google Meet for telehealth, remote work, and education. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to meet with us today. My name is Chris Longo. I am a account manager innovations expert with AOPEN. A little bit about myself. I came to AOPEN actually right around a year ago from Google, where my focus was 5 years of Google for Education, along with Google Enterprise in both Chrome and G Suite in the channel sales market. So I have countless experience with the Google Admin Console, managing policies, and a number of deployments under my belt. So I am going to jump in today and just cover a few housekeeping items before we get started here. If you have any questions during the presentation whatsoever, please send them via the chat function on the side there. We're going to have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation so we can get to all your questions. Also as well, an on-demand recording and a copy of the slide deck are going to be sent to everybody that joined the second it's available. One more thing I want to point out as well, we're also going to have a brief short survey at the end of this. This survey is kind of a different survey. It's not focusing on how we did for the presentation. It's actually more centered around hearing about how you're currently using this technology and what verticals you're focused on using it in. We take this information very seriously. At AOPEN, we're not just a manufacturer. We like to build our roadmaps and build our solutions to kind of circle around your needs. So please take the time to take that survey so we can get that information and it'll help us with our future builds. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Miles Schofield, who will give an introduction. Miles?
Thanks, Chris. Thanks again for joining us today. So let's go ahead and get started. So what I wanted to talk about in this particular webinar is really about what has changed in certain markets in 2020, especially pertaining to cloud-based communications, right? That's what we're really here to talk about is Google, the new Meet technology, the new Meet initiatives, and how they apply to a number of different markets. Particularly, this webinar will focus primarily on healthcare because that's AOPEN and Google are working on two super exciting projects in healthcare this year. So that's going to be the bulk of it. And then, of course, we're going to talk about briefly the challenges associated with communication and remote workforce, and then of distance education. So to break it down a little bit more, obviously 2020 has been something that a lot of people can't say they would have predicted. And in terms of healthcare, one of the primary changes to the market is, of course, that they've needed to severely change their practices, which we know is expensive to do across any type of vertical, let alone healthcare. So healthcare has been forced to make a number of changes, as you probably have been aware. The second is that, of course, regular businesses have had to make a lot of changes as well. You know, there's essential workers, you could make an argument their lives are the same as usual, but in terms of regular office workers and the large population being effectively immediately transferred to work from home caused a massive shift in this market. And of course, the last one is, of course, everyone's kids had to stay home from school. So not only did you have to adopt more work from home techniques, but now your kids, you had to juggle the kids effectively learning from home now, which was another massive challenge as well. So that's what we're going to be covering today. So the first one I want to talk about is communication in general and what the market looks like. And the reason why this is important to think about is who's trying to take advantage of the market, why and how, and then we're going to point out why, what Google is doing to sort of take advantage of this. So I just put up a few of the stock, a few of the extremely well-known companies in this space. and I was hoping that you'd find this interesting because it's not exactly who you'd expect, given the importance of communication, right? Communication, we know, is so important. You figure it would be the #1 thing that Microsoft and Google really want to prioritize, but the massive the company that got affected most by this particular year was, of course, Zoom, right? So if you didn't invest in Zoom at the low and back in March, I don't know what you're doing, because Zoom was able to really take advantage of this particular opportunity more than a lot of other companies. And that really goes to show when you look at the breakdown of the solutions, right? Why Zoom is able to really infiltrate and control a meaningful market share in this particular segment when you have such massive companies like Cisco, GoToMeeting, Microsoft, and Google, obviously in this space. So I'm just framing this to sort of talk about the approach Google is taking to try and take over this particular industry. You can see, I'm sure you've heard of most of these as well. Tandberg's extremely high-end. Adobe has one on 24 as well. So what is Google? What were the primary changes for Google Meet? And it's really a strategic release, right? It came to no surprise whatsoever to me that this release of the new features of the new platform was pushed out in this time period, because this has been something that Google has been talking about for years and years and years. And this was literally the perfect opportunity to seize market share. Microsoft has already been doing this by trying to leverage their Office presence to squeeze people into Teams, right? So it's the perfect adjacent technology. Aside from the major updates that they made to Google Meet that everyone's talking about is, of course, the G Suite integration is now part of your email effectively. And they're bringing the manageability, security, and simplicity of the platform. And I'm sure you saw a bunch of the articles about Zoom's sort of security concerns, because it sort of mimics the web bridge architecture, whereas Google, they all want to keep you on the same account so they can track your use across all their applications. And this type of technology just goes hand in hand with Google's overall web-first strategy, right? They know that you want people to log in, and you want that session to literally extend across absolutely everything people do. You want it to extend across what they're doing on the web, what they're doing on their computer, what they're doing with all their cloud applications, and their communication platform as well. And their main strategy in terms of web first is that it needs to be completely web integrated and not client-based. One of the most difficult things to do is get people to incorporate new applications to support. So the web strategy, where all updates can be supported on the website, makes it just way easier to manage. That's Google's whole strategy, is that everything is web managed in terms of updates and versions and support, which means that legacy clients and all this download update stuff is going to become a thing of the past if Google gets its way. So this is really the strategy. In terms of features, of course, the main thing is that I picked this article up, is that they switched it to free for everybody, right? Which is a massive change. That's been, of course, one of Zoom's primary features, is that the base version is free as well, which really had to do a lot with its initial adoption. So let's talk about Google Meet, but specifically the challenges this year for healthcare. So the first challenge in terms of hardware and people using Google Meet type of communication in a hospital is the fact that your phone's banned, right? Your phone's banned, your iPad's banned, everything's banned, right? And so how can you use Google Meet when all your devices are banned, right? That's the first challenge. The second is, not only are those devices banned, but just inter-hospital communications become incredibly restricted because everyone needs to be isolated now, right? And there's been a number of reports, especially for the hospitals that we've been talking to, where they have to do something like the solution on the right-hand side, where they actually are using walkie-talkies wrapped in plastic so they can dip them in bleach to actually achieve communication just through doors, right? And they're writing on the walls. And this is 2020, and if you have told me that the number, people are still communicating via markers on glass, then it's pretty disappointing, right? And then, of course, the final challenge is that due to not only the restrictions for the patients, visitors are also hugely restricted as well, which is why they're pushing, once again, it's a market opportunity that these hospitals and clinics need to rapidly move towards expanded telehealth solutions to make money. And the two articles I put on here, obviously when it comes to personal devices being disinfected, there was a few articles about this. One of the hospital solutions is, of course, to buy tens of thousands of extremely low-cost Android tablets, and they were literally just giving these things to patients as they die, and then you throw them away, right? So they don't get disinfected, they just go to the room, stay, and then they get thrown away. And then the other one is the very non-intuitive, hospitals are losing tons of money, and it's very unintuitive because how can hospitals be losing money during a healthcare crisis? And it's because of all those additional restrictions and the liability associated with having such an infectious disease present in the general community. So yeah, this has been a massive challenge, and so the first solution that we've been involved with Google is just a straight patient communication device. This is on our Chromebase Mini. It goes directly in every patient's room. It allows them to communicate through using the Google Meet infrastructure. And the main pieces of this puzzle is that it solves a lot of those issues. The AOPEN devices can be disinfected. They're commercial grade. They can be completely wiped down with bleach cleaner. It also solved the issue with deploying infrastructure associated with tablets, right? So the issue with deploying tablets is that they all have internal batteries which can't be replaced because they usually expand, especially on the lower cost tablets. But this device was designed to sort of be, more of a kiosk or a fixture or a terminal. And so it can sit there without a battery for easily 5 years. And of course, if you've ever worked with hospitals before, the major thing is, of course, security concerns. And since this has been a focus for Google, they're really pushing the security of Google, not only the Google as an OS, but also the key other parts, which are the management system, the safety of the management system, and then the safety of the Meet communication. So Google, since they control all three of those pieces, can really leverage that technology to say, hospitals, you no longer have to isolate 100% of your data, and you can only, because a lot of hospitals have to only use on-prem systems, but obviously cloud communication doesn't fit in that at all. So the only company really able to claim and deliver a very cost-effective, secure system in this case is Google, which is why it's so exciting, is because that's how Google got all the traction in education. And of course, it has to be easy to use, right? If you're having a device that's sitting next to patients, it needs to be extremely controlled, easy to use, easy to navigate, right? And from a managed perspective as well. So in terms of this project that we've been working on for a few months now with Google, the major aspects of it is, of course, scalability when it comes to these. So this project is at one hospital currently, and it's obviously going to grow a lot. And one of the primary advantages for working with AOPEN is that when we work with solution providers and Google, we allow them to take those POCs and those initial use cases and really allow them to grow cross-country and cross-region. So this type of solution will go outside of all over North America and other regions as well. And of course, the other one is communication, right? If you're trying to do something new, i.e. trying to deploy a communication network for patients, specifically video, you need to have all parties involved, talking about how to get things to work, talking about how to deliver things, deploy things, how to white glove. And so AOPEN really facilitates that communication in terms of how to manage the devices, how to clean the devices, how to install the devices correctly, along with the SI partners who are more familiar with the hospital restrictions. So the second really exciting project that I've been working on for about 1.5 years now is the AOPEN C-Tile. This is a 15-inch device, and it's a clinic device, right? So the other one was an inpatient device, and this one's an outpatient device, so it doesn't have as high of restrictions. However, the primary use of this device is that it facilitates telehealth. And once again, really pushing telehealth. And what's the purpose of telehealth? It's really about the best optimization of resources, which is one of the biggest things in healthcare. I actually worked in healthcare for 3 years when I graduated from college, and it was every IT project that I did for hospitals in the southern United States was all about consolidation of resources, right? Because if you have one doctor, you know, and they can cover an entire region, that's way more effective than having people actually have to drive to the doctor and you know, manage all the infrastructure that goes along with this. So it's all about effective use of resources. And it's not just doctors. One of the most interesting things about telehealth cases is, you know, you would say, oh, you know, they're just for a checkup with your doctor or something. No, the interesting thing for this particular project is that not only are you optimizing doctor time, but you're optimizing nurse time, clinic staff time. And the last thing that was interesting to me was actually you can dial up your insurance agent on these things as well. So you're in the outpatient clinic and you can dial up and you can get the great news about how much it's going to cost you, right? So once again, the insurance agent and communication with patients about what's covered, what not, what charges you can expect based off what procedure you choose are extremely key as well. And the last thing, of course, is that the AOPEN C-Tile is an actual computer. A lot of times these devices are just really, really low-end embedded smart TVs. But the C-Tile runs regular Chrome OS, which means that it can be a cross-functional device as well. Not only does it run Google Meet and video conferencing and a whole bunch of other stuff, it also, you can watch TV on it. It's used as an entertainment device in the clinic. So it's really giving a whole new level to this type of market, right? So when you're trying to create a brand new type of device for this type of market, lots of work needs to be done. Like I said, we've been working on this project for about 1.5 years, and it was just about creating an opportunity for a solution provider to get into a completely new space, right? Typically, these type of solutions just have TVs, like CRTs sitting around, right? This is where we're making the big push to have an actual edge computer, which is very, you know, that can do a whole bunch more than a smart TV and, of course, just a regular cable TV, right? And in order to get into a new space and drive a new market, you have to, of course, communicate and define requirements and build requirements that no one's thought about before. And this was really the value. So this was effectively a custom engineered device for this customer with custom software integrating with a whole bunch of Google technology. And just to give you an idea, I'm not going to talk about the software stuff, but what AOPEN did to customize this particular project for this customer was, of course, it needs to fit on all these different types of clinic arms. So we had to change the mounting surface because they don't use VESA. Required power over coax. There was a weight limit for the arms, so we had to change the back from metal to plastic, and the support struts. It needed drip guards because typical vents are positioned in an upward fashion. However, that doesn't promote, well, that unfortunately promotes liquid when it's dripped from the top of the device down, which is a major concern in hospitals. So you can see that how many changes that we made based off of the feedback from working with clinic experts, the software partners, you know, of course it needs to be resistant to a hospital cleaner like the rest of AOPEN devices. Breakaway cables, their customers' number one pain point was that when people jerk cables away from this particular device, they break off inside the device. It's something that I would have never thought of without talking to some clinic professionals and the SIs who manage them. But of course, the major one is to support the primary use case, which is telepresence, which you add the camera and microphone to, so that they can communicate with all those relevant parties. So once again, a really exciting project that we're working on with Google and one of their key partners. And the overall push here is just, Google is doing its regular push into the healthcare market, right? They want the 3,000 staff at a hospital to have Chromebooks and use G Suite and things like that. But this type of communication and management technology applied to patients, both inpatients and outpatients, and really trying to improve communication, this problem that we're trying to solve, I mean, the walkie-talkies through the doors, right? These are the type of things that there really should be much more comprehensive solutions. And these devices going into these particular environments that facilitate all that are absolutely fantastic. They're going to make the experience offered by these businesses a lot better. So it's really, really exciting. So keep these ideas in mind in terms of how Google is approaching the healthcare market this year. The second thing I want to mention about healthcare and a little bit in terms of retail is that our devices are bleach resistant and can be wiped down, but there's a lot of technology out there which they're generally called antimicrobial coatings. And so when and where are they used and why are they doing it? So they don't really meet the spec of being used in an inpatient solution. However, they are great for any sort of check-in system or any sort of general lobby. Of course, they're great on kiosks and vending and anything, payment systems. All that stuff is great because you're not going to have the infrastructure to completely sanitize those devices. So anything that you can do is absolutely going to help when it comes to that. And so in response to that, that particular market, we've partnered with an overlay provider called Castus, and pretty much they look like screen protectors, the ones that we're using, and we can pre-install those on any of our all-in-one devices. So if you have a customer that's doing any type of interactive solution and just wants that extra protection, then we can pretty much add it to 10, 15, 19, 22-inch device. So that's really exciting as well. We do have certain options for the embedded sintered technology as well. So if you have a customer that's specifically interested in that technology, as you've seen, we're able to work with our solution providers and our customers to provide those types of solutions as well, because there's certainly a lot of companies that do that as well. Okay, so let's move on to the second use case, which is the remote workforce. I was really interested in this from just a the typical work from home challenges that everyone brings up is, people are going to be less productive, right? You can't control your workers, right? They're probably playing with their dog for 3 hours a day, right? So this was really a science experiment, which I'm always interested in. And the way that this was sort of managed, it was of course managed by every company slightly differently. So the main interesting points to me about what happens when you suddenly just push all your workers to be remote effectively is the major burden that's shifted to the employee, right? On the bottom right, you see working from home costs employees money, but 35 want to continue it. And it's really about the expectation of what resources you need to do your job, right? So if you just have a normal office job, you need a home computer, an internet connection, you need office space, you need the applications, all that sort of stuff. And typically your employer provided that to you, but suddenly, if you were a manager and suddenly you say, hey, 5,000 people, you now have to work from home, the big problem was, well, what computer do I use? I need a better internet connection because I live, 50 miles outside of town where I can only get dial-up, right? So all these were a massive issue. They caused a huge surge where pretty much every laptop in the channel was purchased, right? Every low-end laptop or tablet. I imagine a lot of companies were literally just handing out $100 tablets to their employees being like, okay, this is your new work computer, right? and it was generally just a mess, right, across the board. And so trying to get your remote workforce working correctly, effectively, and deciding who actually gets, you know, what sort of reimbursement is now that you're shifting all your resources to being on the onus of the employee. You know, that's going to change your bottom line, but will that make up for productivity? All that sort of stuff. Super duper interesting. Because when you talk about smart business technologies, one of the major things is that they always talk about is that in terms of OPEX, your major cost in a regular tech company is, of course, going to be salary, but second is office space, right? So this whole everyone needs to work from home and use their own resources is going to save a lot of money, but what is the extra compensation that people could possibly get? So anyway, really interesting to talk about. But the bottom line is that Chrome, in terms of devices to be used as part of a remote workforce, is a priority for Google as well, for the reasons I mentioned earlier in this this webinar. And the reason why it's important is because of control, right? You know, what device can you buy for your worker that you know they're going to get the exact same experience? Because the issue that I'm going to bring up with this one in the education is that a local solution, and this is always true, a local solution is always way easier to manage than a distributed solution, right? If you have an office with 5,000 people and they all have Windows laptops and they bring them in, you know, something goes wrong, they just walk up to the IT department or, you know, and get it solved. Well, now that person is working from home 60 miles out of town. Okay, now do you give them a backup laptop? Do you have to go to logistics and blah, blah? So you can see how controlling IT infrastructure, which a lot of you should be familiar with in terms of distributed IT solutions, is a pain, right? And so Chrome is just one of the many ways that you control that, similar to how it controls the education experience, right? Not only it can guarantee that your employees have a static conferencing device and secure terminal is one of the primary use cases as well, because if you use a terminal at work, then you can have a mirrored remote terminal at your house. But some of the other interesting technology that Google is talking about is their cross-platform communication. So in Chrome OS devices in your house that make you feel like you're more in the office. So the way that they talk about this technology is that if you're trying to remind stuff, if you're familiar with the corporate communication market, it's all about making sure you prioritize your employees' thinking correctly and keep them informed of any changes or any important notice. And you'd be like, well, why isn't that an email? Well, it's really important to make sure that people see this stuff and that people adhere to this information that's being passed around. So how do you do that? Well, you know, do you want to take over people's TVs in their home? It's really about, so Google's solution to this is really about creating communication websites, which you can push to people's phones and Chrome devices and tablets and things like that. So really interesting idea about how to better control and inform your remote workforce. Terminals, I mentioned, Chrome OS is used for terminals since they have a VMware partnership and now a new Citrix partnership as well. So that's one of the primary uses for Chrome boxes. And of course, when we talk about employee resources, right, you know, you go home, your boss tells you to work from home, but I mean, you have a computer, right? Someone else is probably going to need to use the computer too and work from home, right? So the Chrome boxes are a great way just to utilize any screen in your home for that purpose, right? So really, really interesting ideas. I'm glad I didn't have to deal with any of the management of these type of projects, but it's really interesting what it caused in terms of the sales, especially for, of course, the major solution in this case was just to push Chromebooks and laptops in general, and the other market that went absolutely crazy was monitors, right? My point was, well, why don't you just use your TV? But people have this expectation that when you work in an office, you have a separate monitor. All right, and of course, I want to make a lot of the same points about how much of a jarring effect it was. And I do think this was a major opportunity missed, because I feel if Google was better positioned with their Meet at the beginning of this year, they would have been able to capture a lot of, I feel like Zoom really moved into a lot of these, this education space. But now Google has a great chance to get it back with this new technology and all these new updates. So all this stuff, same applies. The challenge of, the centralized IT is now distributed IT, right? Schools' IT budgets are extremely thin. So now that you give everyone a Chromebook to every single one of your students, no longer is it you just come in and swap it out because no one's coming in. You now have to sort of make sure everyone can use Google Meet across the distributed network. And that's really the power of Google Meet, is that, and the enterprise management console, is you can ensure the experience is the same, right? I think we all know that that's the primary thing, is the management control aspect of it at a extremely low price is what makes the system so powerful, right? For education and enterprise, right? So in terms of how AOPEN devices apply to this market is, of course, we had tablets, and we have Chromebase Mini, and our boxes can be used with any existing screens. We have a dual 4K box and all this stuff. I'm always a huge fan of using your TV, since, I mean, you paid $100,000 for it probably, it's probably one of the nicest pieces of electronics in your house. I mean, you might as well turn it into your own conference center, is my perspective. So all right. So conclusions. So AOPEN, the main focus of this webinar was really just to talk about Google's position in the healthcare space from an executive standpoint, and also from communication technology, just like the two solutions we talked about. And it's really exciting, right? Like I said, there's a lot of opportunity to do a lot of good here, which is why it's so great to really build this market. And the second one is that I mentioned is G Suite and Google Meet. Chrome devices can facilitate new work from home solutions. Obviously, right? This is not only about that corporate communication between devices, but obviously the type of Google Meet dependent device on your desk, right? If you want to keep using your own computer, having effectively a corporate terminal that really is in line with what your employer expects, and all that sort of things. And of course, Chromebox's bases can work with existing resources, right? The challenge here is that I'm sure not everyone got a $5,000 laptop from their employer to work from home, right? And so these type of Chrome systems can give you a lot of performance and help you use your existing G Suite infrastructure across a number of resources in your home. So that's going to be really the challenge, is if everyone still works from home, well, what laptops do you buy them, right? How much internet do you pay for? And there's so much discussion around how to upgrade your infrastructure. Can you reduce your office space by half, and all this sort of stuff? So lots of interesting decisions that are going to be made by a lot of companies this year. So anyway, I hope you found this interesting and enlightening. So I'm going to switch it back over to Chris.
Thank you, Miles. And a couple of things to just kind of capture on while we wait for some questions coming in. Reminder, you can just type those in the chat panel, and then we'll be able to get to those right after this slide here. But as Miles said, many of you know the AOPEN name, and you've worked with AOPEN in some fashion or capacity, whether a reseller or buying, or whichever way that you've worked with us. A big part of what we wanted to cover was kind of our product line. And what's really important about this is, as I mentioned before, AOPEN is more than a manufacturer. We're more than just building devices. We're actually a solutions provider, and we pride ourselves in that. Since I started here, most of the deals and the projects I've worked with Miles and the rest of the team have been very satisfying in the fact that we've actually been able to build something from the ground up. We can literally jump in a call and somebody would say, it'd be really nice if we could do this. And our answer back is, well, why not? Why don't you do it? Well, because we never thought of it. Well, fine, let us think of it. So as mentioned, we're a worldwide company. So we have people on the other side of the world that when we're going to bed, they're awake and they're working on the solution. So that gives us a large reach in being able to engineer and create. For instance, I know a lot of you worked with us in the capacity of our boxes and refer to our Chrome boxes as a media player or digital signage machine. But what you don't realize is we've taken many of those same players and our commercial grade boxes, and as Miles said, we've attached them to TVs or to the back of a monitor, and they've turned into full Chrome manageable desktop solutions. So it's really important to, even if you have a question or any insight, you can simply reach out to us at the info@aopen.com down there, and we're more than happy to jump in and see the time frame and timelines it takes to build a solution outside of just our all-in-ones with our boxes as well. One other thing I wanted to point out that's really great, and it just kind of proves my point, is with everything that's going on in the world, we did manage to release it in the US just recently, is the heat finder thermal imaging camera. And yes, you've probably seen millions and millions of these posted everywhere, and it's kind of like, well, here's another one, what's the difference? Well, the difference is it's just more fast, accurate, and affordable. And what they mean by that is, what's the point of putting in a solution that's going to create lines? If you've got lines and you're slowing down workforces of people coming to work and you're putting groups together, well, if somebody does have something, then they're going to gather it in that line. So having a solution that's not only accurate, but people can pass and it can capture multiple individuals at once at a really rapid high-speed rate is incredibly important, because you don't want to slow down your day or your work just because of a new technology that's been put in. If you are interested in that, you can also email the info@AOPEN. Miles did a great webinar on that one, and we'll send you all the details on that information as well. Plus along the lines of all of our other products that we offer from start to finish. We can go ahead and start to wrap this up here, but as I said, please feel free to send those to us. Don't be afraid to reach out. Miles and I and the rest of our team are always available to help you not only talk about our products, but kind of give recommendations or engineering advice on solutions. I know it's a crazy time in a crazy world right now, so it doesn't hurt to eliminate overhead by using somebody else's resources. And I'm telling you right here on this call that we are one of those resources that are ready to help you. We're fully available, and Miles never sleeps, so we can bug him all the time. I'm pretty sure he's an Android, so built by AOPEN.
AOPEN.
So yeah, anything additional for you, Miles?
No, I think thanks again for joining us today, and stay safe, healthy, and have a great day.
All right. Thank you for participating in today's webinar, and we hope to see you again next time. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.